Okay, now I'm on page 133. This section is of the book is called Above and Beyond Nature. And the subtitle here from Breshit is Walk Before Me, Breshit 17:1. So here Shlomo is talking about Noach's covenant, Noach's kabbalah, Noach's Aristotelianism, if you want to call it that, or Chabadism. And he says by Noach it says, Et ha'elokim hitalech Noach. Noach walked with God. And he goes on to say, now everyone knows that God has two names. Elokim, which is gematria teva, nature. Elokim is the name of God which manifests in nature. We also know that God is also the name Yod-Heh Vav-Keh, which is beyond nature, the one who created the world and who is also beyond it. So in a nutshell, Abraham Avinu connected to Yod-Heh Vav-Keh. Abraham Avinu was on a level of Hitalech Lefanai. Abraham was walking before nature, before God, or before nature. All right, so that's basically the same thing I was saying before. This thing about nature, this organism idea of a dialectic, the spiral is the Yod-Heh Vav, the Elokim model. Powers, different essences. So going back to Gestalt therapy, if I do one opposite after another opposite, let's say I work on my game about judging people, the top dog underdog game. So if I play in my one chair, I play the top dog talking to the underdog, the other chair. I have one essence of my personality, my judgmental side, and my other side is the feeling judged or defending myself against judgment or whatever. Those two are examples of two powers powers that I have to use, essences of my personality I can use, relatively pure ideas in this world that I can use, ways of functioning that I can learn in childhood and go ahead and do them. And I can work with a string of these games, and I can end up working with a lot of unfinished business, like I showed you in the first tape, when I was, for example, saying goodbye to a parent and undoing some of that guilt trip and all that stuff, negating some of those negations, and this whole organic process of dealing with one pair of opposites after another. That's in the sense that we're dealing with our nature, our collection of types that make us up. You find exactly the same thing in the Michael Chekhov acting technique. He tells an actor that unless you find a way to get beyond working with these types, you're going to get dried out. You're going to get tired of performing. You'll end up being a sick man, whatever it is. He wants people to get to the place where they can be beyond the types and into their true individuality, their right consciousness, their whatever he calls all kinds of things. Using a higher self, soul. Right, so here it is exactly the same thing here in theology terms here. So here we have Noach walking along with God. Noach is embodying exactly this here and now awareness level of divinity, of spirituality. There's a certain amount of the Tzimtzum, death of ego process going inside the rhythm of contact drill going on, but it's not the main thing. Okay, the extremes are not totally opposite. You don't have a kind of a tormented Van Gogh or El Greco type personality here. You have basically rational personality, that the kind that Rambam in his guide is pointing out to be the ideal prophet, the person that's a reasonable person that has balanced his right side of intuition and his right side, his Chochmah side, his Abraham side with his Yitzchak side, his left side, his Bina side, and Yakov is the middle way, the healthy person. Of course, Maimonides was a doctor. And he probably would have been a good Gestalt therapist. In fact, in those days, he might have been doing it because there's nothing so new about Gestalt therapy. People have been talking to Dibbuks and all kinds of stuff for thousands of years, probably. Okay, so that's, now what about the other side? So let's see what else we can say about that. Maybe I already said it. Noah. Okay, so since Noah is basically a rational, normal person, he can't talk to God like Abraham could talk to God. So we have a certain preset idea of what it is to talk to God here. That, of course, SHLOMO'S is using it, but he's not telling us what it is. And here again, I part the ways with Shlomo Carlebach. I like to spell out what I'm doing to people, and so we can understand it together. And I think we can, in the long run, go further that way, although a lot of people need that kind of a spiritual massage on Friday night that they get from him. So there's a need for both kinds of teachers in the world. All right, so here I go now. In what sense is Abraham talking to God that Shlomo is not talking to God, and how can we understand this process perfectly well with Gestalt therapy? I already said something about that in the previous tape, but let's say it again here. If I get to extreme opposites, and then I go inside, and I find new images, a strong image that I could then identify with, work with, and then that image now encompasses the two opposites on a higher level. In that sense, I can go from being extremely tormented, the kind of state you might get to if you're trying to sell shoes in the city of Rome for the whole year, and suddenly it's Yom Kippur, and you're just allowing yourself to just be totally express your despair, something like that. Because Shlomo's talking about extremes. He's talking about this kind of pietistic religion here of people that are looking for the highs, want to get high on God. He has a thing about it. God gets me high. He made a song out of it. So he's not looking for everyday God. He's not saying God make me reasonable so I can adjust to society. He's saying God get me high so I can get out of society into some other place. And here's how you do it. This process with the tzimtzum, where you go inside and get to the higher levels. Now, in the Gestalt therapy model, it's not so easy to see the difference. But now, if we shift over to another model, we see the thing very clearly, and that's take Brechtian theater. Bertolt Brecht, I hope you heard of him, who was talking about an alternative to Stanislavski theater, Stanislavski being the one that was based on the Noach model, and here we have a theater based on the Abraham model. And that is like this. You do some preparatory work in your life, you go through some emotional stuff. You could do this Gestalt back and forth thing for a while and get some spirals going. But then you need to find a way to separate yourself that. So you're not just using those types of personality thing that you found in your life, but you're getting to a level of what we call individuality. Michael Chekhov would call individuality. And the way they conceptualize it in the theater and also in art, for example, you see sort of, this is romanticism, all kinds of stuff in the history of art. For example, take one of these paintings, pop art, where you have what's called a junk collage. You have pictures of Marilyn Monroe and a tube of toothpaste and the Brooklyn Bridge and all stuff thrown together on a canvas, and you as a performer, or take Chagall when he presents his pictures of Shtetl in Russia or something like that. You as an observer are somehow being invited not to make sense of it with your spiral, but rather to get beyond that image and to allow yourself to trip on it, to find here and now ideas, associations, that'll take you to some higher place. So in the theater jargon, the actors have a jargon for everything, so they talk about going beyond the image, performer on top of his material. So there it is. Now where are these images, say if I'm a performer now, I gave you an example before, if I had this form of waving, and now I start playing with it in all kinds of ways, like a child is a perfect example of a person who has this freedom to use the ideas in a totally here and now, spontaneous, messianic way. So we have the junk collage of my forms of all the different tracks that I built up. I built up a character with a voice track and an image track and a body track, and all these different tracks are doing different things. A movement track, whatever you want to call it. And then there's all kinds of stuff going on in the mise en scène and the staging and everything. So you have a collection of 50 different opposites here, where the audience is suddenly experiencing. And the audience, the actor, now is showing the audience how he himself is free to, in a sense, mock these forms that he was stuck in before when he put his character together, and to play here and now with whatever inspiration he's getting. And what they call the epic, the comment, the actor comment, is a way of crystallizing that into an aesthetic. So Freck would have would write into the script a place where the character would be commenting on the action, or if it's a play without a script so much, or there would be spaces where the actor's actions or whatever could show that he's free from the character. He's just putting in something else there to force you, what's called an alienation effect, to break you out of this spiral, this Aristotelian model of theater, to get you to this epic theater or Platonic, Neoplatonic theater model that he represents. Of course, his aesthetic was coming from Marx, which is a derivative from the traditional dialectical wisdom, whatever it is. Okay, so that's the idea of the performer going beyond the image, illuminating that form, even if it's a simple form like hi, and making it into something else, but it's still hi. It's still hi, but it's illuminated into something else by the here and now ideas that I'm getting. Now this idea, now that idea, now that idea. And I'm playing with it, but I know it's somehow high. It's still high. It's still high. Okay, and the pre-speech was another example of how to free up your behavior from and get to that high, that pre-logical, pre-Genesis, you might say, state. Okay. So that's 33. Abraham was absolutely, in page 134, Abraham was absolutely beyond nature. Why was he beyond nature? Because he was serving God beyond nature, beyond his own nature. Okay, Abraham was like a Brechtian actor, mocking his forms, going beyond his forms, and just doing the most outrageous things. His nature is to invite people, a couple of people to his house, but he went beyond nature by inviting the whole world to his house in order to teach. First of all, to discover himself some higher wisdom, but also to teach the world about chesed. So Shlomo says here, begging people. Can you imagine somebody mamish begging people to come and visit them and come to their house? Beyond nature. It's crazy. It's beyond nature. Right? Like Nachman of Breslov, he's another pietistic chassid here. He tells people, go. God, sometimes you have to roll in the mud to get to find God. You have to break out of your preconceptions of who you are, your types, and get to your true individuality, you might say, where it comes out of the negation of your negations, all the canceling out all your opposites, and getting to that pure flow of pure ideas that comes out of the void. All right. So now he's comparing on 134, Shlomo's comparing Noach and on himself, and on Abraham, when it comes to talking to God. So Noach is on the level of nature. I am a creature and God is God, and I have nothing to tell him. But if I am on the level of beyond nature, why can't I also speak to God? If I am on the level of Budhe Vavke, then I am beyond nature. I know that nothing has to be. Not only does nature not have to be, but even what seems like Hashem has decreed can be altered for the good. Okay, there it is. Now, exactly what happens in this rhythm of contact and withdrawal. A person goes crazy with opposites one after the other, but gets to the extreme where he can't possibly solve it rationally, so he leaves his spiral behind. And in this despair or this total joy or total orgasm, whatever trip he's into, he goes inside and finds some new direction there. And that new idea, and we're talking about an explosion, a kind of a primal scream rather than a gestalt kind of gentle saying goodbye to somebody here. This explosive quality, this spastic, we saw in El Greco and Van Gogh, this kind of bizarre, almost pathological. Some people would say it is pathological. You know, that reminds you of that Hasidic story. You know, people go by, they see the Hasidim dancing, you know, and they think they're crazy or something like that. I don't know what. Okay. So in that sense, the word, the pure ideas that are coming out of that performer on top of his material, is right out of the right out of the oven. It's right out of God. It's before it formulates into a clear opposite, and it's so far separated from that world of forms and preconceptions and tracks that the actor has set up, and now he's able to do it loosely because he's worked on those forms so he can do them loosely, so that when the actor now beams into that junk collage of imagery that those forms he's created, this here and now stream of ideas, that he's illuminating those forms with here and now input, and we get what some people in the theater call star quality, or they call it live form instead of dead form. And here in a Gestalt sense, we say that the person that is dealing with this series of his opposites there in the Noach dialectic and the Gestalt spirals in the spiral thing, is dealing with a series of types, what they call in philosophically speaking myths, personal myths. There's an exercise in the Mabelmai's theater, working on your personal myths. In other words, working on the series of opposites that you work through, your games, making theater out of that. But then, since it's Mabelmai's post-Brechtian theater, once you put that score together, then you are here and now free to get above those myths and show the audience that even though they admit that they're things that your personality would naturally be stuck in, you are not stuck because you're representing the freeness of a performer who is in touch with something higher than everyday bourgeois reality, you might say. Okay, let's see. Is there anyone? Here's another example on the level of human behavior. Shlomo says, difference between a true friend and in other words, platonic friend, and a false friend, an Aristotelian friend. Right here, two people have an argument. And they say, I'm never going to talk to you again. And next thing you know, 5 minutes later, they're on the phone again. Why? Because this sudden explosion of here and now ideas that comes out of the love is able to negate the negations that cause the split, the extreme split, and bring it back to something that would be more characteristic at the level of pure ideas. All right. We talked about Shlomo, going back to the Noach model here. Shlomo talks about the Dor HaMabul, the generation of the flood. How they couldn't just die off. They had to keep coming back. And in other words, it's karma, it's unfinished, this personal mythology that keeps going on, bad karma, they had to keep coming back. So these are the same guys that came back as slaves in Egypt, and they came back on Sinai again. Because they had to complete the dialectic there. They had to keep working on the spiral here. So since they were from the generation of Noah, they were in this spiral Aristotelian dialectic. Whereas Abraham now represents a different kind of dialectic. All right? Another example that Shlomo uses here, people that who have the wrong idea, in other words, disagree with him, so Shlomo says, what God wants me to do is not only to be the most I can be, in other words, not just to make my spiral as high as it can go, but rather, you know, friends, I always say that today there is a big movement in the world to realize my potentials. As far as I'm concerned, this is really pagan, in other words, Aristotelian. God doesn't want me just to realize my potentials. For that, I don't need the Torah. For that, we go to a psychiatrist. We go to a Gestalt session, of course, with a spiral, and have an intensive weekend, and I have some very deep, intensive relationship, and then I utilize and realize all my potentials. Now, that fits right in with the Aristotelian idea that actuality is prior to potentiality. Okay? But except it's a very distorted presentation of the idea, because he's making a caricature out of some very profound philosophical tradition here, because it suits his political needs to peddle his own shtick here. But really, it's not so black and white, you know. It's a matter of emphasis. Working on my pairs of opposites, one after the other, in a spiraling Aristotelian model here, the Noach thing, is true. Getting to some actuality, which is more prior to or more messianic than all the opposites I'm stuck in. That's the way of looking at it. But on the other hand, most of the time, we need to do that preliminary work before we're ready to have these explosions into these Platonic mystical moments. You know, the model Shlomo seems to be advocating here is some kind of instant high. As if I remember correctly, in the introduction to the Gestalt therapy verbatim, Fritz Perls makes a point about he's very much against the current generation who's into this instant high business. Because he's stressing that this process of working on the opposites and working through the different sides of your personality and all that stuff is very important. We need that. And he was experiencing in those days all kinds of people who were on dope and all kinds of encounter groups and all kinds of stuff where people are spaced out in one way or another and leaving their not just their brains behind, but also their ability. They're not just leaving their deductive logic, but they're leaving most of their inductive logic behind also, because they're trying to short-circuit the process of the dialectic, the phenomenology, the spirit here, this unfolding process of that's very important, to jump to the Platonic, explosion, sudden experiences. Well, some people naturally can do that trip. But I would say most people need a proper balance between a certain amount of Aristotle, a certain amount of Plato, a certain amount of Noah, a certain amount of Abraham. We need them both. We need the middle way, and it's an illusion to think that we could, to be one or the other. I'm not saying that Shlomo was silly enough to be just an Abraham man and not a Noach man. No, he was also very aware of the need for the balance, and in the course of his life, he, had all influenced all kinds of people in all kinds of ways. But I'm just picking out a couple of things here where it's easy to misinterpret him and see him as too much into the Breslov trip and not enough into the Chabad trip, when we know from his life that he was influenced very much by all kinds of teachers, and his stories and his teachings show all kinds of wisdom. But I'm just making a point here of showing that there are these two covenants, and he himself says it. There's the Noach covenant and there's the Abraham covenant, and we need. He's obviously saying that he prefers the Abraham covenant, but he realizes the other one is important also. God says that the world will go on. He gives Noach the covenant that the world will not be destroyed. This endless process of awareness has to happen. At the same time, there is the possibility of going beyond that,